as you probably know, the Hereditary Peers Bill means that all current sitting hereditaries will be removed at the end of this session. We don't know when that is going to be, but it's now, I think, everybody's expectation this will be soon. And it's up to the Prime Minister to announce that date. And it's very clear that when that happens, we will all be leaving. However, in the last few days, there's been a little bit of movement in that, well, way before that, you will know that 3 hereditary peers have been converted from hereditary to life peers. 1 crossbencher and 2 Liberal Democrats. And in the last few days, it's been announced through agreement that there will be 15 places out of the 43 Conservative hereditary peers for further conversions. And that's a figure that's there. And I'm afraid I'm not sure what the next stage will be, and nor do I know what my future will be. I'm making the assumption, I think correctly, that I will almost certainly be leaving the Lords at the end of this session.
Would you keep your title?
Absolutely. Of course, you keep your title. And of course, there are many peers who are not sitting in the House of Lords who are peers without a seat all around the country. And I guess I will be falling into those ranks. And I'm as one of these things. I've obviously, what I will say, assuming that I do leave, very sad about it. Since I was elected in on a hereditary by-election in 2010, I've made it my life. I don't really do anything else in terms of a serious job, but I do an awful lot of other things, including some charitable work. But this is my main role, and I've been extremely lucky to have served 5 prime ministers, and I've had pretty well a continuous front bench role up until July 2024, and for that I'm extremely thankful. I think that my view is that there are certain elements within the Labour Party, particularly Old Labour, and this takes us right back, of course, to 1999 when Tony Blair came in, and as you'll know only too well, he made the step to remove from the House pretty well all the hereditary peers full stop, apart from the negotiated 92. And I know from speaking to people a generation above me that that was an enormous sadness. It was an exceptionally difficult time, but it was in a way an era before mine. But it is odd that they're using the 1999 sort of pretext to continue and to finish off the job that they say that they failed to finish back in 1999. I think that is the main focus of what they are doing. But it is quite interesting that this time round, and we don't know how many more there will be, at least there will be 15 Conservatives converted. And it's difficult to say whether that is the equivalent of the 92, you know, the negotiated 92 back in 1990. It's tricky to make a comparison between the negotiated 15 that are now being allowed. I probably shouldn't, but it's interesting just to make that comparison.
You're the Shadow Minister of Department of Work and Pensions, correct?
That is correct.
A lot of people, especially younger people, don't like paying into the pension systems and sort of want it scrapped completely. And of course, you're a Conservative, so would you like to keep the Conservative mind with sticking with it?
Yes, and now I understand. Yes, that's absolutely fine. So I think it's very well known that so many people, too many people, are not saving enough for their retirement. And just as an aside, 1 in 5 self-employed are not saving for their retirement. And one can understand why in that case, because cash flow is all important. Some of the self-employed aren't necessarily paying themselves, let alone being able to pay into their pension. But the gist of your question really is auto-enrollment, because we brought in auto-enrollment during the last few years of our time in government. And that meant that if you were age 22 joining a company, you would automatically or by default be contributing into a pension scheme. But the crucial thing, Harry, is that there is an opt-out, so that if you felt that you wanted to spend your money on something else, you could. The opt-out would allow you to do that. But it's interesting that the statistics that we have show that the opt-out rates are very low. And it means that people, or most people, understand the importance of saving for retirement. When you, as I will be at some point, when you get to that point and you don't have enough money, it's a very difficult thing. Some people just don't have enough in their retirement, and I think it's important to look ahead. I think it's important intergenerationally to do the best you can to allow people who are working now to save more than enough for when they retire.
What's a sort of day in the life like for a shadow minister in the House of Lords? Because of course it's very different to a shadow minister in the Commons.
Hmm. Absolutely. So we all in the Lords have our particular portfolios, and of course, as you've said, I cover work and pensions. And I think I'm lucky because I covered that in government for 18 months, so I know a little bit about the issues. What normally happens is that I'm in most days reasonably early, but bear in mind that we often have to sit quite late, 10:30, 11, with votes. So it can be quite a long day, but I'm not saying that's the case for every day. Monday to Thursday is fairly full on, but normally we're away by about, including as ministers, shadow ministers, by about 5 or 6. And then Fridays are usually laid aside for private members' bills. And of course, the assisted dying bill has taken up an awful lot of time on recent Fridays. You may know that the House itself sits at 2:30 on a Monday and a Tuesday, and a Wednesday at 3 o'clock. But in terms of my shadow ministerial role, the key point is what I've got to do in the chamber. And it varies enormously. Sometimes it's just like last week, pretty busy, where I had at least two oral questions to prepare for and to deliver in the House. And I also had the two-child limit bill. And as you will know, that the Labour Party have decided to raise the cap. On our side, Conservatives, we want to retain the cap because we think it's a matter of fairness. I can go into that further. So that kept me really quite busy. There was a long debate on Thursday on that bill with about 20 or so speakers. And then I suppose the most important thing to say in answering your question is that when there's a bill as a shadow minister, you're really very busy. So I'm on the pensions bill at the moment, and we're going to be very busy tomorrow and next Thursday and the following Monday on the report stage with very likely votes. And there's a lot of preparation and a lot of engaging with outside bodies, with stakeholders, and of course internally, and particularly with the Commons. That's where we work very closely with the Commons. And in my case, my superior is Helen Whately, who's the shadow minister, shadow secretary of state for work and pensions in the Commons. So we work closely together.
You mentioned the two-child benefit cap. Was it true in saying Labour wants to scrap it completely, or were they trying to raise it? I mean, to what number?
Yes, they want to scrap it. They don't want a cap. So in other words, if you are a family who have 2 or more children, then there's no limit in terms of what help can be given to that family because they've got 3 children, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 children, whatever it might be. We take a slightly different view, very much a different view, because we think that it is very unfair on those who are working and have to make choices about how many children that they wish to have, often have to hold back and having more children than they would wish because they simply can't afford it. But if you're on unemployment benefits, we think it's unfair that a substantial amount of money is then paid to those families who have more than 2 children. So we want to retain the cap, and we will bring it back when we're next in government.
In the department, what sort of things do you also look at other than of course pensions and benefits? What's sort of the wider work?
Absolutely, there's a lot going on. For instance, all the welfare issues, of course, come under us in shadow form. So we continue to press our case that the welfare bill needs to be cut quite dramatically. And we were undertaking that, making some very good progress under Mel Stride, who was the then Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. And then the general election came. But hear this, that at the moment, the health-linked benefits bill is 60 billion, going up to about 100 billion by 2030, if nothing is done. And of course, as we know, Keir Starmer tried to do something, but then was stopped by his backbenchers. And in effect, they're in the doldrums in terms of doing anything about cutting the welfare bill. Just to be slightly fair about it, Stephen Timms is leading his review. The Timms review is due to report in the autumn. I think it is. Tis the autumn. In terms of what he is going to do in terms of welfare, and he's working in collaboration with the disabled groups. So they're working together. And I wish them well, but I'm really not sure what's going to come out of it. But what is needed is something quite dramatic and quite draconian to cut this bill. But crucially, to be compassionate and to look after those who are genuinely in need. And it involves looking at the detail and looking at those who, for example, have mental health issues. We all know people who do. We all know people who genuinely have mental health issues, and the state should be there to support them. But I think it's important to look at all the detail because I think there are, it's not all as it is.
A lot of those people who do have mental health issues find it very offensive when sort of people overwork their issues too to sort of claim the benefits as well. What
Yeah,
sort
I
of
think that's fair enough. I think it's important to say once it's very easy to say, oh, let's cut benefits, but it's got to be done in a fair way, and it's got to take account of those with the assessments, better assessments, to scrutinize everybody who applies for these benefits to be sure that they really do deserve them. That is the key. That's the missing link. And maybe there's a shortage of assessors. It's all to do with fairness, process, compassion, and making some very tough decisions.
what sort of involvement does the Conservative Party Forum or Renewal 2029 sort of affect these shadow departments on policy?
Yeah, a lot actually. I know that there's a lot of work going on, obviously led by our leader, Kemi, in terms of formulating and rolling out the policy. I suspect you were there, but I was up at conference and was there listening to the superb speech from our leader and some of the early policy announcements, together with, and I will say this, a superb outline of what it is to be a conservative, what Kemi herself thinks, what drives her, what makes her tick. I thought it was really, really excellent. So, but back to your question, I mean, certainly on the work and pensions side, we are working very hard to continue to develop our work and pensions policies so that we are well prepared for when we're next in government. And also, we can actually explain the policies and are able to be grilled on the policies and that they're properly paid for, they're fair, they're well thought out, all these things that you would expect or should expect.
Yeah, I think that really separates our party from sort of reform or any of the other groups, that we actually do cost the things. That's sort of why our policies come out later than the uncosted, rushed reform policies. Um, yeah, and
You're
I mean, it's,
absolutely right. You're absolutely right there. And actually, I think that Kemi has been incredibly sensible, and she said openly that um, uh, there's lots of things to mull over after our very bad defeat in July 2024. One of them is to acknowledge that we've made some mistakes, but we also did some very good things over the 14 years. And secondly, in terms of rebuilding, is that I think she has said very openly that it will take up to 2 years to get to the point where you are rebuilding and you put all your detailed policies in place. And crucially, you get to a point where, and we hope this will happen, that the people, the voters, will just begin to look at us again. And I think Kemi's being very careful and honest about that. And hey, look, we're just over 18 months after the general election defeat. And I think that we're making remarkable progress. And I think Kemi herself has put her head above the parapet extremely ably and is being seen and is being heard and is being noticed 6 months before I think she thought that she would be, which is fantastic.
Do you sort of work with the wider cabinet? Are there cabinet meetings? How often are they?
Well, I don't link in with the cabinet as such because I'm not at cabinet level. So being a shadow minister in the Lords, I'm very much working at the Lords level, and that means that our leader in the Lords, Lord True, holds various meetings, and we form our own, not our own policies, but we form our own way of doing things. And of course, what our main role is in the Lords, 60% of what we do is to scrutinise legislation. So all the bills, let's take the pension bill, for example, all the bills that come up to the Lords are scrutinised by us line by line. And our job is to go through the bill and pick up and challenge the government where we think they are falling down on the minutiae of the bill. And then at the report stage, which is coming up next week on the pensions bill, for example, that's when we challenge them in the chamber, and we will, I'm sure, be calling some votes on certain issues.
I mean, the Hereditary Peers Bill came through, obviously, the Lords. How did that sort of work? Because obviously, Lord True was against, well, I would imagine that everybody was against it. Um, how can you sort of counter that or, propose changes or even scrap it?
Yeah, so yes, on the Hereditary Peers Bill, I thought it was very ably led by Lord True. It's been a very difficult 18 months on that, and he has been stoic with so many other leaders in the Lords at fighting our cause. We don't agree with what the government are doing, which is removing, you've got a political party removing a cohort of peers, yes, the hereditary peers, with the argument, as I said earlier, but going back to 1999 and finishing the job, as Labour have been saying. And we think it's disgraceful, and we've said so. And Lord Strathclyde, who is the sort of quasi-leader of the hereditaries in the Lords, said that it was a nasty little bill, and he said it again last week at the final stage of the bill. But we are moving on now. The bill is now through, and we have to move on. And in effect, Nick True, Lord True, gave a superb speech, and it was a mixture of saying to the House that this had been an extremely difficult time, but also saying that we must in effect move on.
What could you speak about the working pensions bill that's going through then? Is that a Labour proposal or?
Very much so. So we've got 3 days of report coming up. You may have read about it in the papers, but the key issue that we've got a real problem with, and by the way, quite a lot in the industry, in the pensions industry, have got a problem with, is something called mandation. So mandation is that the Labour Party have put in the bill a reserve power. And that reserve power is that if pension schemes do not invest enough in the UK, they will then bring about that reserve power, which will be in primary legislation, to make them do it. And that is investing up to 10% in the UK. However that is defined, we don't know whether that is particularly equities or whether it's, we don't quite know what the sort of products are. It's all rather opaque. And all of that is supposed to be coming out of secondary legislation. So it's called the mandation power. And it's very likely to come up on Thursday with a big debate with a lot of people across the House. And that includes the Liberal Democrats, it includes the crossbenchers, and certainly us. And we're going to make some fairly powerful speeches and we hope, attempt to vote this down and to win a vote in the Lords. It then would have to go down to the other place, of course, but and in the other place, I do acknowledge we acknowledge that they have a big majority. It is true that it is likely that will then be sent back up to us for further scrutiny. But this is the main issue. I could go into more detail, but there's another issue that we feel strongly about, which is called scale. So that, in other words, for pension schemes that are 25 meet a threshold of 25 billion pounds in total assets, they are being given preferential sort of treatment, as it were. For those smaller funds that are doing very well, that would otherwise have to close down, we're wanting to challenge the government on making sure that these funds can be included because they are displaying innovation and they are RAG rated green or dark green. And so we think that size, for the sake of it, is not everything. And we're therefore challenging the government on their scale elements in the bill. I think many are. I mean, I would say this, that as I'm steeped in the pensions bill, it is disappointing that there's nothing in the bill about pensions adequacy. It brings us back to the fact that we did raise this at committee stage. It's not a complete priority for us because there are other priorities, but we are very disappointed that there's nothing in there which would be beneficial for young people, of course. But there are all kinds of other bills going through the whole time: the Victims and Courts Bill, the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. And I think, to answer your question, I think in every bill there are many elements that are important for young people. Again, I could take you through chapter and verse, but I think every bill has its detail. Good point. I must admit, I take the Times, and in yesterday's Time, Saturday, there was quite a bit about the pensions bill, page 2, and also in the leader. You might want to sort of check back on it. So we are making an impression, which is great. We are able to get our state, pressing our case. And there was a very good article in the last Sunday Times by Dominic Lawson on the pensions bill. So we're getting some traction, but I think you make a very good point. In terms of the Lords as a whole, we are rather below the radar. I mean, the population as a whole doesn't really know what we do. I'm not sure how interested they are. They're only interested, I think, when there's an issue that the press raise, maybe to do with one or two peers who have done something that they shouldn't. And of course, out of 800 peers, that can happen. Shouldn't happen, but it can happen. And therefore, suddenly the Lords is in the press. And when that happens, it is very unfortunate that the press use pictures of us in our red robes, giving the impression we wear red robes every day. We don't. We wear them once a year. I wear a suit every day. I'm in there as a working peer. And I think, therefore, something needs to be done to highlight the work of the Lords to the population in general. I am one of the greatest advocates for the House of Lords. I think it works very well. I may have one or two things about the appointments process and people coming in and all of that, and we've just spoken about people going out under the Hereditary Peers. But as a corporate body, as it were, we work, I think, very effectively. We do our job, which is, as I say, to scrutinise legislation. But there's a lot of committee work, very important committee work that goes on. And I'm a member of the Built Environment Committee, which I could say a little bit about. And it's fascinating taking evidence from experts in the field. And then you've got the government being held to account in the Lords as well. So you've got statements, you've got urgent questions, and you've got, of course, debates as well. These go on the whole time. That makes up the other 40% of what we do.
I mean, you were speaking about the debates. The most recent debate I've sort of seen on my Twitter feed is the end of life bill. Or could you speak about that? What's your views on that?
Absolutely. Well, I have to say, I have been sitting in a bit on the TIA bill, it's called, Terminally Ill Adults Bill, but it's called the end of life bill. I take a slightly neutral view because I actually genuinely think that if somebody is in a desperate state and about to die and is in desperate pain and wants to end their life, they should be allowed to do so. But the safeguards have got to be there. The yeah, the safeguards and the process has got to be absolutely nailed down. And it's not. I'm absolutely convinced from what I've heard from some really excellent speeches in the Lords over 10 weeks or something. There have been so many Fridays devoted to this. And the speeches have been from lawyers, from medical professionals, from those who are in the know. I am convinced that the bill is not fit for purpose. And as I say, it's not because I'm against the idea. I'm in favour of the idea if the bill is fit for purpose. I don't know what's going to happen, actually, Harry, because we're running out of time for this session. This has been in the papers, as you know. I really don't know what's going to happen, but the government are in a bit of a dilemma, I think, because they're never actually going to get the bill through. It's not their bill, of course. It's a private member's bill, led in the Commons by Kim Ledbetter and in the Lords by Lord Falconer. There's been talk in the papers about using the Parliament Act. I don't know the whys and wherefores about that, but it's a challenge for the proponents of the bill, being a private member's bill, and I think, as an aside, a bit of a challenge for the government as well in terms of finding the time. Well, put it this way, I think we don't know yet, really. I think that my guess is that the bill will have to come again in the next session in whatever form. I'm just assuming it would be another attempt by the proponents of the bill in the next session. And then we'll have to see how that goes. But I say again that provided the right checks and balances are agreed and everybody nods and says, yeah, we've gone as far as we can, and people can't be coerced into ending their lives, and the checks and balances are in place, the medical profession are happy, the doctors, the consultants, the process is there, whether it's using medical professionals and or judges, who knows, but all these debates and discussions are going on. And I'm not in a position to say where we are on that now, but it needs more time, amazingly more time. Yeah, so this is just for people who are listening, that you will know that we are an appointed house, the upper house. Apart from the now 88 hereditary peers who came in through a slightly sort of peculiar form of election. Let's talk about that briefly. So that I was very lucky in 2010 to win an election. It was a by-election because one of the then sitting Conservative peers died, which led to a vacancy. And I then I happened to be up against 30 other Conservative hereditaries who wanted to either get back in or get in for the first time. So I felt very lucky when I got the call to say that I had won. So just to go back, so the then 92, but now 88, there are 88 hereditaries now, will go, as we know. But as I say, it had this peculiar form of election. But I would argue that it worked actually, because those coming in, like me, came in with a great sense of duty. And as I say, it's extremely extreme privilege to come in to work in the Lords. You may well say, well, what's the difference? Why aren't those who are appointed coming in and they have a sense of duty? Maybe they do, but I think that it is slightly different, because when you're appointed, you come in, you have all the red robes, and your heyday is when you actually come in. And we've seen a lot of peers come in, and some very good ones actually, who have come in, but for whatever reason, they have then chosen to not attend too much, or they've not participated too much, or maybe they're running things, or I don't know what. There are a variety of reasons why people who have come into the Lords then don't participate. But the hereditaries, to be fair, nearly all of them have done that. So the future, and back to your question, I firmly believe in an appointed upper house. I think if we had an elected upper house, and that is an election by the population, rather like the Commons, we would become too powerful as a body in terms of the bills that came up to the Lords. We would be too powerful. I would be, or could be, if I stayed in, Lord Younger or Senator Younger. I would almost certainly be paid a salary, which I'm not at the moment. I receive an attendance allowance, and that would be very expensive for however many peers that we are. Just say we remain at 800, which is too many, but if it was 800, that's 800 times whatever salary we would be paid. Secondly, we would have an electorate to look after. There would be a mailbox. Rather like the Commons, we would have a constituency. That's all very unclear, but it is very likely that that would be the case, which is equivalent to what happens in some other countries, including America. And I just don't agree with that. Our job is to scrutinize the legislation and to be in there to, as experts, to do that. We don't should be diverted by having a post box and a constituency. So I feel very strongly that whatever the future holds, we should continue to have an wholly appointed upper house. It's an allowance. So every time you attend, and I fill in my own form for this, it is on your honour to fill in for the maximum amount per day. And I think it's all open knowledge. It's about £361. Or it's on your honour, if you're only in there for a short period of time, to claim for half that amount. And I think it's fair to say that most people operate that very honourably and honestly. I really do think they do. So that's an allowance we get, and it's therefore, if we don't attend, we get paid absolutely nothing. We also get travel. So if we come in from wherever we live, we can claim for travel. It's different if you're living in London as opposed to living outside the M25, but I won't go into that. And that's really it. When we pay for food, whether it's in the restaurants or in the river room, it's very slightly subsidized, but not that much. And in fact, in the main dining rooms, I would say there's hardly any subsidy at all. It's quite expensive. Having said all that, it's a great privilege to dine there. And I think that should continue. Funnily enough, I did a sum 2-3 years ago about the cost of the House of Lords, and I looked at the details that are published openly about the total cost of the Lords, whatever that figure was, and I can't remember it. I then divided that total cost. That includes all those who help out, the cost of running the restaurants, the cost of having all the staff, terrific staff we have. Anyway, I then divided that by 30 million, which is roughly the number of taxpayers. And I came up with a figure of £3.22 per taxpayer is the cost of the Lords per year. And that is slightly back of the envelope, of course, but I don't think it's too far off. And I only make the point again that if we were paid a salary, I don't know what the figure would be because I don't know what the salary levels would be, but it would be an awful lot more.
I mean, £3, how reasonable for such a great institution.
£3.22. Yeah. I think exactly. I'd like to think that we do give value overall to the taxpayer. It's a good question. I actually don't think that the hereditary peers is an issue that's seen by too many, frankly, outside the Westminster bubble. It's obviously an issue for the current Labour Party. It's been a running sore, as you will know. But I think for people around the country, they will know about the hereditary peers, but I'm not sure how interested they are really. It's not really a priority for them, I don't think. And that is probably exemplified by the fact that you haven't noticed too much about it in the papers. I think you mentioned you'd seen something about them, but that's only because this is the end of the Hereditary Peers Bill. But I really don't think that the vast majority of the population are that interested. I'm not saying they're not bothered. I'm just saying they're not particularly interested. They're more interested, I think, in cost of living issues and what's happening in their own home patch, I would argue.
Do you think the Conservative Party will win in 2029, a majority?
I actually think we're absolutely going in the right direction. I think it's fair to say, obviously, after July, I think we were all concerned. It was a heavy loss. And when that happens, you think the worst. And I have to admit that I thought then that we could be out for 10 years. And this was before Kemi was elected in. It was a very difficult time. We were very heavily defeated. We'd been in government for 14 years. As I said earlier, I argue that we did some very good things. but they have been swallowed up, unfortunately, by some mistakes that have been made, which Kemi has acknowledged and is very humble about now. And I think it's good that she continues to mention this. And then I have to say that not long after me saying, "Oh, I think we're out for 10 years," I then thought, there were a lot of mistakes being made early on by the Labour government. I thought, well, maybe it could be 5 years. But to answer your question, I am very hopeful. I think there's a tremendous opportunity in 2029. I know that you'll say there's reform is there, but actually, I think I also know that they've got their problems, quite serious problems. We've still got an awful lot of work to do to get to the point where the electorate are going to trust us again and are going to think about voting for us. I am not complacent at all. It's a lot of work and it's uphill, but we are going in the right direction. I absolutely firmly believe we've got a fantastic team. The shadow cabinet is fantastic, and there's a lot of hard work going on. And I do think we're getting the ones that I've seen anyway, the policies right. And I do think those policies chime so much with what the British people are thinking. That is key. And that's as a result of all the work and the focus groups and all the work that we're doing. So I think it's an exciting time. It's not easy, but it's an exciting time. I can't tell you whether we will win, but I am ever more hopeful.
I think Conference 2025 was a real turning point. It really was.
I'm so pleased you say that. I totally agree with that. And I am not complacent and should not be about reform. Um, we can see the polls, and we can see the polls with Greens. Another story. But then we've had, which is very disappointing, some defections to reform. Who knows what's going to happen? But they are very much a nascent party. Their leader, it's fair to say, is Marmite. Some people love Nigel Farage because he's a populist. Some people like listening to him. I don't, I have to say. And then some people genuinely don't like him at all and would never vote for him. So he's got all of that to overcome. Whereas I think that the contrast is that I think Kemi is making a real difference. I think people are acknowledge, even if they might not necessarily vote for her, they acknowledge she's doing a good job. They acknowledge that she's making a difference. They acknowledge that she's brave. And I have to say, I would go further than that. I think she's got it right in terms of presenting herself to the United Kingdom. Because I think that she is quite hard hitting, but she's also got a terrific sense of humor. And I think if you mix humor carefully with your message, you get your message through. I think that's very powerful. And I'm very excited about it, actually. What do we have, 121, or is it less than that now, 119 MPs down in the Commons, Conservative MPs? Up at our end, there's been no change. We are still 257 or so peers. And there's been a lot, I think you'll know, there's a lot of interactive work going on. And certainly I will be doing more, and many of my fellow peers will be doing more to help out in constituencies, that is in campaigning, going to speak to associations and helping where we can. I think the idea is that we're going to be more proactive as a body in the Lords, working more closely with our Commons colleagues and doing our best to help to win in 2029 or whenever it is. I think the main answer to that is that we have people from CCHQ coming to see us pretty regularly. And that's to give us briefings. It could be briefings to do with polling. It could be briefings in terms of policy. But we're quite blessed that we have a weekly meeting anyway of the whole of this Conservative peers, and we have visiting speakers. They could be senior members of the party, shadow cabinet members, but they are often senior people who work in central office.
I spoke to the chairman of the CPF the other day, and he's also the chair of the Centre for Small State Conservatives. And he was one of his ideas is the Conservative MP group needs to work closer together and have more teamwork, because
Mm,
that was sort of a struggle for the last, um, term. Do
mm.
you think the Lords work very well together?
I think we work very well together. As I say, we have this weekly meeting, but there's an awful lot of corridor chat that goes on the whole time. As you can imagine in the Lords, probably the same in the Commons. I know it is. Um, and we are, as never before, with this government, and with all their U-turns, with all their, in my view, dreadful bills. Just take the schools and well-being bill, and you take there, there's just been some really dreadful bills that um, the government will get through because many of them have been in their manifesto, which has brought us all together. Is my point. It's brought us all of us 257 together, and we're not all there at the whole time, but there's a lot of us that come. We feel very passionate that we've got a really important job to do, but also to help our colleagues down at the other end. And I say again, I think there's more work going on in working in tandem within our shadow departments, but also just cross across the corridors, really. I should say one more thing, which I've said really earlier, which is that we've got a fantastic top team in the Lords. We've got some um, really able people who give advice to Lord True and Lady Williams, who's the Shadow Chief Whip, and they're both great leaders. And I think we feel very lucky with the team up in the Lords at the moment.
Thank you for speaking to me today. Do you have any closing remarks to young Conservatives, or anything you'd like to say?
No, only that. Just thinking about it, young Conservatives, hooray! We want more young Conservatives, and I would like to say I'm so impressed with those who join up as Conservatives. I was a young Conservative once. Um, we're immensely grateful that people feel that as well as leading their normal lives, they go to football matches or they've got their jobs, that they can step out and help locally, um, join the party. And the hope is, of course, that these very people will, continue to work in the party and climb up and hopefully become MPs or become senior members of the party, whatever. And I would just like to just say thank you. You're all incredibly welcome. We've got a huge job to do. We all need to pull together to win in 29. I really hope that we can. And at the rate we're going, I think we could, but there's still an awful lot of work to do, and it requires everybody, young and less young, to pull together to do that. Get out, get campaigning, get our message across in the right way. Rather a long answer, but I feel very passionately about it because that's actually the route that I came up from. I was started off as a volunteer. I had a job as well, but I was a volunteer and was out on many nights delivering or working for my local association.